They kicked us out when I was a kid, laughed as we packed our things. 20 years later, I came back, not to visit, to buy the entire street. One by one, I tore down every home, including theirs. This isn't revenge. It's the rewrite they never saw coming. There were two kinds of people on Holly Ridge Lane: those who lived comfortably and those who were tolerated just long enough to be reminded they didn't belong. My family was the second kind. We moved into the neighborhood when I was 7. My father had lost his job in Philadelphia, and my mother had just beaten breast cancer. Every penny we had went into that house at 32 Holleridge, a faded single-story ranch barely standing between two pristine colonials with trimmed hedges and stone fountains. The day we moved in, neighbors peeked through their windows like we were tracking mud through the front doors of a museum. They didn't say anything to our faces, not at first. Instead, it came in little ways: invitations to birthday parties where the other kids ignored me, PTA meetings where my mother's homemade cookies were left untouched while store-bought cupcakes were devoured, lawn notices about grass length, passive-aggressive comments from Mrs. Easton across the street. "Oh, I heard Section 8 is buying into the area. Hope not. Brings down property values." They didn't say we were poor. They didn't have to. The worst of them was Brady Keller. His family lived 3 houses down, in the gray colonial with the iron gate and ivy-covered walls. His father ran a small chain of car dealerships, and his mother organized neighborhood events like it was her job. Brady was my age, with a permanent smirk and a father who told him things like, "People like that only bring trouble." He'd pretend to be my friend at school, only to joke with his friends that I smelled like a basement. Once, during a science fair, he swapped my project labels so the judges thought I stole someone else's idea. No one punished him. They told me to be careful with accusation. I learned early how thin the line was between charity and cruelty. When I was 13, things got worse. My dad's second job cut his hours. The bills stacked up. Then one day, we came home to find red paint on our front door. The word fraud sprayed in block letters. The HOA said it was vandalism, but warned us not to bring the property value down with public spectacle. We moved out 6 months later, not because we wanted to, because we had no choice. Foreclosure took the house. The bank sold it to a couple from Ohio who tore out the porch swing my mom loved and painted the siding a nauseating beige. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I didn't have anyone to say it to. We moved to a cramped 2-bedroom in the city. My father drank more, my mother worked nights. I studied by streetlight through cracked windows and roaches in the walls. And I never forgot Holly Ridge. Not the smell of fresh-cut lawns, not the way the houses glowed like dreams behind closed gates, not the way the other kids laughed at my shoes, at my clothes, at the way I brought peanut butter sandwiches to field trips while they bought lunch from the concession stands. Most of all, I remembered the day I walked down the block alone while moving trucks waited at our house. I passed Brady and his friends. One of them said loud enough for me to hear, "Finally, took long enough to clean up this place." They all laughed. I didn't. I just walked past them, silent, numb. But in my head, something dark took root, something cold. I would come back, and one day, they wouldn't be laughing. I worked harder than anyone in that concrete box of an apartment. I took every scholarship, every grant. I ate once a day and studied until my eyes blurred. I got into Penn State, then NYU for my MBA. While others went into finance or tech, I went into real estate. Not flashy condos, not celebrity mansions. I studied land acquisition, zoning law, quiet power. At 29, I started my own firm. I didn't name it after myself. I didn't want credit. I wanted leverage. By 34, I had enough capital to acquire property under shell companies. I learned how to find pressure points in a neighborhood. Buy a few houses quietly, let them rot just long enough to spook the market. Offer lowball buyouts to anyone looking to sell. Push the value down further. Most neighborhoods resist that kind of rot. But Holly Ridge, it practically invited it. Turns out, most of the original residents were aging. Their kids had moved out, the families had split or moved to newer developments, many had second mortgages. A few were drowning in debt behind picket fences and manicured hedges. And all of them still remembered my family. Not by name, but by shame. That was the first sweet moment of satisfaction. When my assistant placed a folder on my desk, 12 properties along Holly Ridge, all for sale, and I was the highest bidder. I didn't smile, I just nodded. The next day, I drove down the street. Same trees, same sidewalks, but everything felt smaller. The homes had aged. Some windows were clouded with dust. Fences leaned, paint peeled. They had spent decades holding the world back. But time always wins. I pulled up to number 32, my childhood home. The porch swing was gone. The lawn was a patchy mess of crabgrass. But I recognized the shape of the front window, the crack in the driveway, the place where I used to sit with my mom and watch birds nest in the oak tree. I bought that house on the spot. I didn't remodel it. I bulldozed it. I stood there in a black coat as the machine ripped through drywall and snapped wood beams like twigs. Neighbors watched from behind curtains. Some stepped out and stared. I didn't wait. I didn't speak. And I didn't smile. Because this wasn't joy. This was justice. And it was only beginning. The first demolition got their attention. The neighbors whispered, peeking through blinds and watching from porches like moths circling a flame. They didn't know who I was yet. To them, I was just a developer with too much money and not enough respect for heritage. But I saw the fear in their eyes. They knew something was coming. I didn't stop with 32 Holly Ridge. The next two purchases were easier than expected. Mr. Carmichael had cancer. His wife was too tired to fight. They took my offer in silence. $400,000 in cash, no questions, no delays. I bulldozed their house 2 days after closing. A week later, the Crenshaws across the street put theirs on the market, hoping to cash out before the street lost more value. I offered them less than they were asking, but they took it anyway. Their home was leveled the following Friday. The air filled with dust and splintered drywall. By now, the street had 3 gaps like missing teeth. The sidewalks led to piles of rubble and torn insulation. I knew what it looked like. I made it look that way on purpose. The rest of the block started to panic. A homeowners association meeting was called in a neighbor's garage. They passed around lemonade and folding chairs like it was a summer picnic. I showed up uninvited, dressed in black, sitting in the back corner. Grady Keller was there. Older, thicker, with a beer gut and thinning hair. He didn't recognize me. Not yet. He stood up halfway through and barked about how someone needed to stop this destruction before the whole neighborhood turned into a strip mall. I raised my hand. They looked at me, confused. Strangers weren't supposed to talk. I spoke anyway. I'm the one buying the houses, and you might want to accept it, because I'm not here to negotiate. The room went still. I didn't wait for them to respond. I left. 3 days later, my firm made public the blueprints. Luxury townhouses. 12 units with rooftop patios and private garages. Renderings showed smiling couples sipping wine, kids playing in private courtyards. The press release called it a necessary revitalization for an aging block in a prime location. That week, 2 more houses went up for sale. I bought both within 48 hours. Mrs. Easton, the woman who once sneered at my mother's shoes and asked her not to leave broken toys on the lawn, tried to get the city council involved. She called my development a corporate attack on tradition. I countered by purchasing the mortgage on her home through a shell group and tripling her monthly rate. She lasted 2 months before defaulting. On the day her things were carried out in boxes, I stood across the street, arms crossed. She saw me. She finally saw me. Her mouth opened. She blinked. Recognition hit like a slap. "You," she said, choking on the word. I said nothing. She left that afternoon. Grady was the last one left. He refused to sell, told every reporter that he would be the last man standing. that his father built their family legacy here and no rich bastard with a bulldozer would take it from him. He still didn't know who I was, and I didn't care if he figured it out or not, because the street was mine. I let his house rot. Surrounding lots filled with steel frames and foundation pits. Construction noise started at 7 and ended after dusk. His windows vibrated from drills and hammers. Dust crept under his doors. Mice took refuge in his attic after the nearby demolitions. He complained to the city. No one listened. My permits were perfect, my inspections passed, my hands were clean. Then one morning, his truck tires were slashed. A week later, the city ticketed him for environmental violations due to uncollected debris on his lawn. Then his mailbox disappeared. I didn't lift a finger, but I didn't stop it either. He broke a month later, sold the house to a private buyer for half its value. My buyer. He was gone before dawn. I watched his truck pull away through a construction fence. He didn't wave. He didn't even look back. The bulldozer arrived the next day. The Keller house took longer. Brick was harder to chew through than wood. But when the final wall caved, I stood there like I had for all the others. And smiling. The street was mine now. Every house that laughed at my hand-me-downs. Every porch that watched my mother carry groceries in silence. Every door that never opened when my father knocked to ask for help. Gone. The new development began fast. Walls rose, roads were repaved, property values tripled, new families moved in, ones who would never know the boy who lived in the shadow of their perfect lawns. I never gave interviews, never put my name on the signs. The firm logo on every blueprint meant nothing to them. But I knew what they had done, and I knew what I had undone. Justice wasn't loud. It was bricks in the ground where sneers used to be, and I was just getting started. Owning the land wasn't enough. They had taken more than just a house from my family. They took dignity, security, the kind of peace you only know when you don't feel like you're being watched. I remembered the shame in my mother's eyes as she clipped coupons at the kitchen table. The way my father sat in the dark most nights, one hand over his mouth, like he was trying not to scream. So I didn't stop with Holly Ridge Lane. I bought the connecting block, Doral Avenue, then the half loop that led into Elmwood Circle. Quietly, surgically. Some homes were owned outright, others leveraged through mortgages buried in old lending institutions. I tracked them all. If they had equity, I bought out their lenders. If they were struggling, I made offers they couldn't refuse. And when I couldn't buy outright, I made life difficult. Road work that rerouted traffic through the same driveways at all hours. Delayed garbage pickups due to contract disputes. Construction noise that went well beyond legal hours thanks to city permits I knew exactly how to grease. These neighborhoods had built their kingdoms on whispered cruelty and fake smiles. Now they choked on their own politeness, too proud to admit what was happening, too slow to stop it. I built modern units where nostalgia used to live. Townhouses, duplexes, green-roofed apartment buildings with minimalist architecture, the kind that said, "We're not your kind of rich anymore." Some of the original residents tried to push back, formed small resistance groups, petitions, online campaigns about preserving heritage. But they were shouting into a vacuum. No legal standing, no traction. I'd already bought the land their signatures were standing on. The only person who tried to face me directly was Eric West. He lived 3 streets over and had been one of the louder parents back when I was a kid. He ran neighborhood fundraisers. He was the one who once asked my father during a block party if we qualified for free lunch. He hadn't changed much. A little rounder, more sun damage on his face, but still full of swagger. He came to my office uninvited one afternoon. "I know who you are," he said. I didn't answer. "You think this makes you better than us?" I looked at him, long and silent. "No," I said. "It just makes me finished with you." He called me sick, called what I was doing a vendetta. I didn't disagree. Before he left, he asked one more thing. "What do you want, man? You want us to apologize? Is that it?" I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city skyline. buildings I had touched, streets I had reshaped. No, I said. Then what? I want you to know that when your grandkids ask why the house is gone, why the neighborhood changed, why no one remembers who you were, you'll have to look them in the eye and admit you didn't matter enough to stop it. He didn't respond. He just left. The next week, his house was sold. I didn't even have to buy it. The pressure pushed him out. I had become the weather, the fire that turned everything dry and old into ash. And yet, there were no smiles, no victory laps. Every time a bulldozer flattened a home, I stood at a distance, face like stone. Because this wasn't celebration. This was reclamation. When the last home came down, I took a walk through the ruins. No cameras, no press, just me in the dirt. I passed the old lot where Brady used to set up basketball games he never let me play. The cracked sidewalk where Mrs. Easton once told my mom we should try Goodwill for uniforms. The mailbox where I found a note in 6th grade that said, "Go back where you came from." All gone, all under my boots. It should have felt like victory, but it felt like stillness, like I had silenced something that had been screaming in my chest for 20 years. And I still had one final piece left to move. The last piece was the park. Willow Creek Park sat at the southern edge of Holly Ridge. It was small. One slide, a rusting swing set, a faded basketball court with one broken hoop. But it was where everything happened back then, where Brady pushed me off the monkey bars and laughed when I landed on my face, where the Keller family hosted a neighborhood barbecue and forgot to bring enough food for everyone, where my mother sat with a styrofoam cup of gas station coffee and told me things would get better, even when she didn't believe it. That park didn't belong to any one house. It was city property. But it had always belonged to them, the people who whispered, judged, excluded. They treated it like an extension of their yards, their territory. They never expected someone like me to own the dirt under their memories. The city was hurting for funds, like most cities. I knew who to talk to, which council members were tired and overworked, which clerks were behind on paperwork. I submitted a redevelopment proposal under a different name, green space converted to modern residential zoning, community housing, environmentally efficient. It hit all the right buzzwords. No one knew the park was part of my plan until the fences went up. The headlines came fast. Beloved local park to be replaced by urban housing complex. Neighbors outraged at loss of generational gathering place. Protests formed. A few locals chained themselves to the swings. Others handed out petitions in grocery store parking lots. But none of them mattered. I owned the land. I had the permits. And I had waited too long to stop now. On the morning demolition began, I showed up early, wore black like I always did, stood just outside the temporary fencing as the crew moved in. No camera crew, no ceremony. I didn't want the world to watch. I wanted them to watch. Mrs. Easton was there. She stood across the street, arms crossed, lips tight. Her daughter had come back for the weekend, trying to rally community support online. Brady drove by slowly in an old pickup, windows rolled down, expression blank. He didn't stop. Eric West stood further back, hands in his coat pockets, quiet, still trying to understand how a ghost from his past had burned down the kingdom they'd built with polite cruelty and false smiles. I stood still as the first metal claw crushed the swing set. The chain snapped. Metal folded in on itself, like paper. Next came the court. Years of scuffed sneakers and exclusion pulverized into powder beneath steel teeth. And the slide. That damn plastic slide where I once sat alone, listening to kids whisper about how I always wore the same jeans. Gone in seconds. I didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't smile, because this wasn't revenge for them anymore. It was closure for me. When the dust settled and the lot was cleared, I stood inside the fence and walked to the center of the field, put one hand on my hip, closed my eyes. No sounds of children, no laughter, just wind. That night, I sat on the concrete steps of one of the new townhouses. The first unit had just finished construction. Granite counters, white oak floors, security system keyed to a private app. I looked down the street. Rows of identical, polished buildings lined the block now. Nothing remained of the old houses. Not the rusted mailboxes, not the cracked driveways, not even the trees. Families would move in soon. New people, young couples, retirees, artists, tech workers, people who didn't know me, people who didn't care who I had been. I could have lived there in one of the units. I had the pick of the entire street. But I didn't, because I didn't want to live in their ashes. I just wanted to own them. And now I did. I stood, looked at the last remaining pile of rubble near where the park used to be, and turned away. Behind me, machines roared back to life, preparing to lay the last foundation. Ahead of me, the city lights shimmered. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of that street on my back. I didn't feel like the poor kid in the wrong shoes or the charity case invited to pity parties. I felt nothing at all. And that, more than anything, was the victory they'd never understand.